And then we go to share screen and we go to, okay. So right now you guys are, you can see the screen?
Yes.
Okay, great. All right, so we left off the last time we met. We were finishing Daf 10, and at the very end we have this statement: Amar Rav Yehuda, Amar Rav Yechia, Hamhalech b'derech al yochal yoter mishnei ra'avon. So because the last piece on 10 was there about traveling on the road, and when you're traveling, you should enter a city before the sun goes down. And so we're talking about traveling on the road, and the rule here is, according to Rabbi Chia, that when you're traveling, you shouldn't eat more than you would eat in a year of famine, which I assume means very little. You're limiting your food. So my taima, what's the reason for doing that? And then they say hacha targimu. Here they explain or translate literally, I guess. They interpret. That's a mishum maina, because of bowels, because of your I guess digestion system. B'marava amri mishum mizone. But in the west, which is Israel. So here is Babylonia, because that's where these guys are living. And in the west, that's Israel. It was because of food supply. So he gave an explanation, where was it? Where that if you're traveling on the road, you might have stomach problems if you're eating. The other one is that if you set out on a journey and you eat too much, your full stomach will make it down and make it difficult to travel. Well, I don't know the reality of it. I mean, I guess I was thinking there are times when if I eat a lot and then I start walking, you can get a stitch in your stomach on your side. I don't know if walking while you're full, you have bowel problems, but that's what they said in Babylonia. So the question then becomes, well, what's the difference? My banaihu, what's the difference between these two, or is there a distinction between the Babylonian explanation and the Palestinian explanation? And they give two possibilities. One is Ika de Yadve Ba'arba. Well, if you were on a boat, that would be the difference, a practical difference between the two answers. If you're on a boat, you're not worried if traveling on the road causes you to have digestive problems. Well, you're on a boat, and you're traveling on a boat, you're not going to be walking very much, but you might have the problem of running out of food. So you got to still watch how much food you eat to make sure it lasts the whole journey. And the other one is the ka'azel me'avna la'avna, and avna is a station. So you're traveling from one station to another. And here in this case, and I guess how did he explain it? I think it's like, you're going in distances where you're going to be able to get food. So you don't have to worry about running out of food, because maybe every couple of miles there's a little town where you can pick up food, but you'd still have the problem if traveling causes digestive problems, you'd have that problem. And then we have a little story here, or a little factoid. Rav Papa kol parsu farsa achel chada rifta. Between every parasang, which is a Persian mile, which was I think it's around, I forgot how much. Oh, it says 4 kilometers. So it's a little bit more than a mile, right? Wait, right? How many kilometers in a mile? 3?
About 2.5. Yeah.
So
It's about 2.5.
Oh, 2.5 miles. So
it's 2.5.
Yeah, so he ate a whole loaf of bread every 2.5 miles, because kasavar mishum maina. He understood that the reason, again, he's Babylonian, he understood the reason for eating light is because of the bowel situation, your digestive situation. Now the question is, and we have two answers here. The explanation of Steinsaltz is, since he was a healthy guy, he wasn't worried that eating a whole loaf of bread between every couple of miles would be a problem. The other possibility was, if you saw the notes here, was that that a whole loaf of bread wasn't that much. I guess it wasn't considered to be that much food. That might be considered starvation, not starvation, but famine rations. And so therefore, it was just a little bit of food he would eat in between each place, so that wouldn't bother his digestive situation. So it wasn't clear to the commentators what his eating a loaf of bread in between. Is it too much or too little? I mean, is it cause digestive problems, or he doesn't worry about it because he's a healthy guy. He's not, that doesn't bother him.
Now, we don't have any real idea of how large a loaf of bread this might be.
Right, exactly. There's no idea.
But my own personal experience on backpacking trips is that essentially I couldn't manage to eat enough. I would always lose weight over the course of the trip.
Yeah, that's what I thought was interesting too. So and I guess I just don't know enough about the realia of the time. What does it mean to travel, and in that time period, is it? Are we talking about walking? Are we talking about going on a donkey, or I don't know if they had horses, but a donkey or a camel maybe in Babylonia, that it would be upsetting to your stomach. I don't know. But it's just funny that the commentaries give different answers, trying to understand what it means that by eating a loaf of bread is to try to explain how that impacts his digestive system.
I was also struck by the boat. Now, I guess this come from Babylonia or Israel.
Well, this was Babylon. Oh,
the boat.
Well, the
Gemara answers is all it
right.
said.
The Gemara answers. So it could have been the Babylonian editors.
But there would seem to be some possibility of motion sickness, at least.
Yeah, that's right. I was thinking about that too.
Of Israel, at least.
Right. That it would be more problematic to eat a lot if you're on a boat. But, but okay, this is their understanding. Okay, so now we continue. Ramar Rav Yehuda Marav, Kol Hamariv Atzmo B'Shnei Ravon Nitzal Mimita Mishuneh. And then they have a proof text here, Bira'av Padcha Mimavet, that anybody who limits their food intake during a period of famine is saved from a unusual death or a strange death. And that's because they're reading the verse from Job, Bira'av Padcha Mimavet, that in famine he will redeem you from death. So you usually would think Me'ra'av mibayla. It should say, God will save you from starvation, that kind of a death. From starvation, God will you will be saved from death. But it says in starvation, in famine. And so therefore the idea is, it says, Bischar shemariv atzmo b'shnei ravon, the reward for limiting your food intake during this period of famine is that you will be saved from an unusual death. I'm not sure why it just doesn't say mita, and why it's important to say mita mishuneh. Maybe because, I don't know. I mean, if you were in a famine period, you'd probably be dying of famine. Maybe the idea is that if you limited your food intake, you'd be, a mita mishuneh during a famine would be like, falling off a cliff or something like that, or having a horse trample you would be the normal death during famine is you die of starvation. So by limiting your food intake, you would actually be saved from one of these other types of deaths.
But why? I mean, if you starve yourself in a famine, okay, you're protected from this unusual death, but you're not protected from usual death. So if you're old or whatever, you're sick, I presume doesn't count. But I don't get it. I mean, why? Well, I don't get the whole thinking of where this topic came from and why they came to such a, to me, weird conclusion.
Well, I think, what's interesting is it's in the context, as we're going to get to a moment, about the responsibility you have when you're living in a community and you're going through a communal issue like a famine, that it's important for everybody to take responsibility and to share resources, I think.
Okay.
So in a time of famine, what they're trying to say is you should limit the amount of food you eat because there's limited resources, and therefore the rule is everybody has to be responsible. You have to limit your intake. And maybe that's it. Maybe that's the idea, is why they use mitah mishuneh, is that if you're a responsible citizen, or if you're not a responsible citizen and you eat your normal amount, and that means there's less for other people, then something really bad is going to happen to you. You're going to have an unusual death, not just dying of famine, which a lot of people may be suffering, but something weird is going to happen to you. And maybe it's a kind of a warning that the verse is trying to teach: be responsible. Because we'll get to that in a moment.
Okay.
As you see here, well, here's some other, this is this is almost like practical advice. Amar Reish Lakish, asur la'adam l'shamesh mitato b'shnei ra'avon, shene'amar u'liyosef yulad shnei vanim b'terem tavo shnat ha'ra'av. That Reish Lakish says that you're forbidden from conjugal relations during a famine period. And then they, once again, a proof text, and it's from the story of Joseph, where it's very clear that he had 2 kids before the famine started. Now, in the context of the verse, it's just that was the reality. He had 2 kids before the famine started, and then the famine. But they're pointing out as a causal relationship, because a famine was coming. You don't want to have more mouths to feed, and you want to be careful. And I think that's true. In a lot of different ways, right? I'd be very interested to know if during this pandemic there are less children born or more children born. More because people are home, they have nothing else to do. Less because you're concerned about economic situation and the health situation. So I'd be curious to know. But the idea here again is that you should there's a certain personal responsibility that you're taking during a famine. Don't add more mouths to the communal register. And then we have a teaching, a Tana, a Baraita, which says, Chasuchei vanim mishamshim mitotehen mishnei ravon. So that there was an out. If you didn't have children, those without children could have relations, since ultimately there's a mitzvah of being fruitful and multiplying, that if you didn't have any children, even during that period of famine, it's okay to try to have children. It's just if you have children already, not a good time to be adding more mouths to feed. So there's an exception for people without children. They can still have relations. Tanu Rabbanan, okay, another Baraita, the rabbis teach. בזמן שישראל שרויים בצער ופרש אחד מהן בעין 2 מלאכי השרת שמלווין לו לאדם ומניחין לו ידיהם על ראשו ואומרים פלוני זה שפרש מן הציבור אל ירא בנחמת ציבור. Okay, so here we have another teaching again, I think, with this idea of communal responsibility. At a time when Israel is suffering, no, it's not necessarily only a famine, but some kind of persecution or suffering. Maybe it's a pandemic. And somebody doesn't, kind of leaves the community. They separate themselves from the community. 2 angels accompany him. And I think this is a really interesting phrase. They place their hands on his head. And they say, this person, you so-and-so, that separate yourself from the community, you will not benefit from the comfort of the community. You won't see this consolation of the community. And I just thought, now, somewhere Steinsaltz said that the placing their hand, right there in the commentary, place their hands on his head as though he was an offering. That's a very interesting image that they're making, they're basically sacrificing this guy, I guess. Otherwise, you know, it's an interesting image because usually I think of placing, when a person places their hands on another person's head, it's like a transfer of authority. I think Moses does that with Joshua. When the Reform, I didn't finish it at the Reform Rabbinical School, but at the Reform Rabbinical School, at the graduation for the rabbis, that's what the president of the college does. They give an individual blessing to each rabbinical student, and they place their hands on their head. So it was an interesting image here, this idea of placing hands and saying, basically, buddy, you're not gonna, you know, you separated yourself out, so you're not gonna benefit.
Isn't the word for ordination smicha?
Yes. Lismoch, which is to place your hands on the heads, on the person's head. So, but I just thought that was an interesting image. I'm not sure really what the purpose, because it seems like it's not a comforting image, but a strengthening, supportive image. And yet here, it's not supportive at all. It's basically critical of the individual. Tanya Idach, we have another Baraita. Bizman shatzibur sharui b'tza'ar al yomar adam elech leveiti ve'ochal ve'ashteh ve'shalom alayich nafshi. When the community is suffering, a person shouldn't say, well, I'll go to my house, you know, I'm going to eat and drink. I'll be okay. Shalom alayich nafshi. My soul will be okay. My soul will be, peace be upon you, my soul. I think that's a real issue in society, right? Is that we have, right now we're going through a pandemic, and I've actually been feeling a little bit guilty because for Lizzie and me, it's not that hard to get through it. I mean, we miss seeing people, but I can work from home. You know, Lizzie's not working right now, and she can go into Chicago. She's now going into Chicago regularly to watch a couple days a week to watch our grandson Jack, and but I know that there are people out there really suffering. So I've all I can do is I've increased our giving to food pantries, but I think that's a real issue in society. Is that the community is going through a hard time, and individuals say, but it's okay for me. Well, if you do that, there's a verse from Isaiah that is ascribed to that individual. V'hinei sason v'simcha harog bakar v'shachot son, achol basar v'shatot yayin, achol v'shatu ki machar namut. Behold, joy and gladness, slaying oxen, killing sheep, eating flesh and drinking wine. Let us eat and drink, for tomorrow we shall die. I think that was a Roman thing too, wasn't it? That,
yes.
Eat, drink, for tomorrow we die. So those are the soldiers, right? And what does it say right afterwards? What's the next verse? V'nigla be'oznei Adonai tzvaot. This God responds, Im yechupar ha'avon hazel lachem ad tmutun. Surely this iniquity, this sin, shall not be expiated. It will not be atoned for until you die. So very harsh response to people like that who think only of themselves when everybody else is suffering.
It seems to me, people like us who can sit at home and don't have to worry about enough to eat are quite different from the people who, well, I looked at the front page article in the South Bend Tribune about some of the members of the Indiana legislature who want to ban things like mandating masks and closing businesses when they're high spread, or ban employers from requiring immunization and things like that. I mean, the people who are sort of actively
obstructive,
doing things that could cause suffering for others.
Well, let's look at the next one, because I think the next one is interesting in terms of how do you interpret the conclusion. So the group we just read about, those people who say, hey, I'm okay, I don't got to worry about anybody else, and they're basically kind of cursed that you're not going to be able to atone for this wrong until you die. That turns out ad kan midat beinonim. That's the middling people. Right? That's not the wicked people. Those are the average Joe who doesn't think about another person. Aval b'midat reshaim makati. What about the person who is actually the attribute or the quality of wickedness? So the verse here says, again, it's a verse from another chapter in Isaiah. Come, I'll fetch wine, and we will fill ourselves with strong drink, and tomorrow shall be as this day, and much more abundant. Like, we don't care. And what's written afterwards? The righteous perishes, and no man lays it to heart, and godly men are taken away, none considering that the righteous is taken away from the evil to come. Now, his explanation here is, this verse teaches that righteous people suffer early death to prevent them from witnessing the harm that will befall these evil people. So his explanation is that the response to this evil people who say, I don't care about anybody else, I'm only interested in myself, and I'm just going to accrue more abundance to myself, that the response is that good people, which will then lead to a breakdown in society, where you have people who are only thinking about themselves and taking advantage of others and exploiting, leads to a breakdown in society, and therefore the righteous people will die so they don't have to see this complete breakdown. That's actually a reward to the righteous, that they should suffer, they should die earlier so they don't have to see the horrors that are coming. And I think that's an interesting concept, a way of looking at it. I don't know if anybody has a different understanding of what's the relationship between evil people taking for themselves, and that the response, the causal act, is righteous people perish.
A couple of things. One is the proof text earlier from Job is in the context of, see how happy is the man whom God reproves. So this fits in better with some things just a bit later. But the other thing was, I was really struck just now. This come, I will fetch wine, and we will fill ourselves with strong drink, and tomorrow shall be as this day, and much more abundant. And if you look at the income and wealth divides in the United States right now, those at the top of the wealth pyramid are actually doing quite well.
Oh yeah.
While those at the bottom are being devastated. They're fortunate that the fortunes at the top are improving.
Yeah, absolutely. It's even more unfair in some ways that they do better. I was thinking that the way that Steinsaltz is reading this is that the first verse is the evil act, or what the wicked people doing, and the next verse is the response. And I'm thinking that these two verses should really be going together. That is, what it makes it evil. Why are these guys worse than the guys up here who said, I'm just going to think about myself? And I was thinking that what makes it them evil is that their actions cause righteous people to die. That it's not that it's a blessing, that the righteous person shouldn't see this horrible stuff going on, but rather that's what it is that when people act wickedly like this and take more than they should, the result is that decent people die. And that's No, Steindl is playing on this part here where it says that the righteous is taken away from the evil to come. Because because of the evil, the righteous person is gathered up. But I just wondered if the two, maybe you can read it, that this is the action and this is the result. Good people die when wicked people take advantage. I don't know if else had a different reading of it. But again, we should, and then we continue along this line. Ella yitza'er adam imat tzibur. A person should suffer with their community. Shekein matzinu b'Moshe Rabbeinu. Shetzi'er atzmo imat tzibur. So we found this with Moses. Once again, Moses is our great example of a person who is connected to his community. And the example was when they're battling Amalek, that Moses' hands were heavy and they took a stone and they put it under him and he sat upon it, which must be very uncomfortable. Because why didn't they have a pillow or a cushion to sit on? Because, as long as he kept his hands up, they would be victorious. If he ever let his hands down, they would start losing to Amalek. So it was really important for us to keep his hands up. So, couldn't you make him comfortable so it wasn't so hard for him to keep his hands up? Rather, Moses said, since the Jewish people are immersed in suffering, I too will be with them in suffering. So I'm going to be uncomfortable too. And then the conclusion is, anybody who suffers along with the community will then be rewarded. They're going to be able to merit and see the comforting, the consolation for the community. Here's and then the Baraita goes on. Maybe he'll say, Mia me'idbi, like who's gonna testify against me, right? Because you're talking about the food in your home, right? So I'm having a good time eating in my house. Nobody knows that all the good food that I'm eating, and they're suffering. Who's gonna testify? So we have a whole bunch of witnesses. Avnei veito shel adam v'korot beito shel adam me'idim bo shene'amar. And then we've got it's the stones and the beams of your house. And we have a verse, a proof text, of course. For a stone shall cry out from the wall, and a beam out of the timber shall answer it. So that's one. So your house is going to testify to you. It's going to testify. They'll know, and they'll somehow express it. So don't think you're getting away with it. Another possible Devei Rab Shela Amri, the school of Rab Shela. There they taught Shnei Malachei Asharet Hamalavin Lo LeAdam Hein Meidin Alav, that every person has these two ministering angels who accompany them. Right? We saw a minute ago how they can turn against a person who's being selfish. Here, they'll testify against you, as we see in the book of Psalms. For he will give his angels charge over you to keep you in all your ways. So there's, don't think you're getting away with this stuff. There's somebody watching. Here's another possibility, another witness. Rabbi Chidka Omer Nishmato Shel Adam Hi Meida Alav, as it says in the book of Micah, keep the doors of your mouth from her who lies in your bosom. So we're talking here about your soul, your maybe we'd say your conscience. And finally, we have Yesh Omrim Evarav Shel Adam Me'idim Bo. Your limbs are going to testify, as in Isaiah, you're my witnesses, says the Lord. So so what do you make of these different witnesses?
I'm thinking the sentence about the man's limbs will testify against them.
Yeah.
I mean, he won't look so skinny if he's eating in secret and everybody else is starving. Right. So it'll be obvious.
That's good. I didn't even think of that. I thought it was just that, again, it's like a psychosomatic pain, but no, I bet you're right. You're going to look hearty and whole, and everybody else is going to be losing weight. How come you're not, how come you're so, you're not thin like we are? That's good. Yeah. I like the middle of the soul. You know, you're gonna feel guilty. It's gonna start burning you up. And okay, let's go on to the next. Eila mudam ve'ein avel. This is from the song, Moses' final song. Faithful God, Justin, well, faithful God who does no evil, without iniquity. El emunah, what does that mean? Kashem shenifra'in mina risha'im le'olam haba afilu al avera kala she'osim. Just as a person is, punishment is exacted from a person who, from a wicked person in the world to come, even for the a light, the minor sins that he does. Righteous people are paid back, what did he translate again? Punishment is exacted from them, even for the smallest sins in this world. It's a big difference. And then the opposite, the ein avil, there's no iniquity, without iniquity. Kishem mishalmin sachar latzadikim laolam haba afilu al mitzvah kalasha osin. Even for righteous people, they are paid back a reward, even for the smallest good deed, smallest mitzvah that you observe in the world to come. But the wicked people, they get their reward even on a small mitzvah that they do in this world. This is this basic, this kind of a basic rabbinic theology, which is focused on the world to come. So, every time I hear people say that we Jews focus on, we're a this worldly religion, not like Christianity, I'm like, well, I don't know how true that is. We invest a lot in the world to come. And here's an example of it, that why does wickedness, what's the classic theological question? Why do good people suffer and wicked people prosper in this world? Well, here's the answer, or one answer of rabbinic theology, because good people, everything comes in the next world. Everything is just in the next world. You suffer in this world because you want a clean slate when you enter that next world. You don't want to owe anything. Whereas wicked people, oh yeah, it's pretty good in this world. They might not seem to get punished for all the wrongs they do, but in the next world, it's going to be very bad for them. And they will really suffer because they've gotten all their dessert. They ate their dessert first, and now they got to eat the spinach.
Did the idea of the world to come, does that just state from rabbinic times, or does it go back further?
No, the world to come is all this stuff, Messiah, world to come, that's all basically rabbinic. I mean, they will find verses in the Bible
Yeah.
to justify
verses for anything. So.
But there's really very little in the Bible about a world after this one, other than like a physical place where the dead go. Sheol, it's a place that they go, or you are gathered up with your family, whatever that means. Practically, it meant that your bones were buried in a family crypt. But you don't really have much. You have allusions to it in Isaiah, Daniel, certainly, about reward for after death, but not really that much. It's mostly a rabbinic concept of this next world, where everything is worked out perfectly, where there's perfect justice.
I also was struck when I read this, contrasting it with the Puritans, I guess the Calvinistic idea that, the elect must be seen to succeed.
Mm-hmm. Right. Oh, the elect. Oh, in this world, you mean? Right. That's that. Right. It works out. Yeah, that's kind of the exact
The
opposite here. Right.
opposite point of view.
Yeah, exactly. And it doesn't. Again, it's an attempt. All religions try to explain why there is injustice in this world.
Yeah.
This is a solution to it, and obviously, it's a great solution because we're not going to know until you get to the next world. So
an immediate disincentive.
yeah, right. So you can put all your money on that one, and you won't lose because you're not going to know until you don't need to worry about winnings and losings. But it's an interesting solution that to explain why it not only why is there injustice, why does good people suffer, but why is it that it seems that bad people do okay? We'll see how that works out with our ex-president, whether he gets on counting in this world. But it seems like there are people who just get away with stuff, and the answer is, well, yeah, that's because they got all whatever reward they're going to get in the short time they lived in this world is done, but in the next world it's going to be a long period of suffering. So it's a theological solution. Now,
this is also what I was really thinking about with this earlier proof text from Job, because that's given in the context. If you go back to Job, that's given in the context of how happy is the man whom God reproves.
Uh-huh.
Can you hear me?
Right. Well, that's exactly. That's the same idea. Is that you should be right when you suffer in this world. Don't be too downhearted about it, because it is just cleaning the slate. It's purging in this world, so everything is going to be great in the world to come. And it is, at some level, it's comforting. It's a comfort to think in those terms. Even though we also have these other great Talmudic passages where the rabbis are confronted with that theology, and they state right out, I don't care, I don't want the reward, because suffering hurts. They don't want to suffer. So it's wonderful that and I'm going to talk about that Monday night in this class tomorrow night on social criticism in Judaism, that I'm going to look at a Talmudic story. And it's just one of the things that's so remarkable about rabbinic material. And of course, there's a lot. It's not a systematic theology, but how they state something in one place and they'll completely undo it in another place, because of course there are no easy solutions. And the fact that they're honest about that makes it more meaningful, I think.
Rabbi, could you hear me?
Okay, so here's the next piece. Tzadik v'yesharhu. This is a continuation of the verse in Deuteronomy. Amru b'sha'at petirato shel adam leveit olamo, kol masav nifratim lefanav ve'omrim lo kach v'chach asita b'makom ploni b'yom ploni. So they said, in the after a person dies and he goes to his eternal home, Beit Olamo, all of his deeds, all the person's deeds are placed before him, and they say to him, you did this and this at this time. Here's your what do you call it, the sheet of evidence. And vehu omer hein ve'omrim lo chatom ve'chotem, and they say to him, and he says, yes, I did it, I agree. I mean, I accept that I did these things, I acknowledge. And they say, okay, sign. You got to sign your name. Because here's this passage from Job, which we then incorporate into the Unatan Tokef prayer on Yom Kippur, Biyad Kol Adam Yachtom. And every man's hand signs onto his deeds. I love this image of that. You watch your whole life. After we're done in this world, we have to sit and watch every moment of our life over again. And that's either a cause for pride or regret. You know, did we do everything we could have done? And I love that image, and that you have to say, yeah, okay, I signed. Yep, I did that. I did it. I can't. Here's the video evidence. I can't get away from it. And you have to acknowledge it. V'lo od ela shematzdik alav et hadin. You have to justify whatever the sentence, the judgment that you have upon yourself. V'omer lahem yafeh dantuni lekayem ma shene'amar leman titzdak bidov recha. You've judged me well. Now here's an interesting thing. So he translates it here as, he says to them, the person who just died says to them, the heavenly court, you've judged me well. This response serves to fulfill that which is stated, that you may be justified when you speak and be right when you judge. Now here, you know, because of English, we can't tell, is this a plural you or a singular you? Since it's a capital Y and the verse is talking about God being the judge, the assumption here is that it's God is judging, but the Hebrew says Yafeh dantuni, plural. You plural have judged me well. Now it could be referring to it's not just God, it's the whole heavenly court. Or I was thinking it could be the deeds, like the person says, looking at his or her life, and all the deeds that they've engaged in, and then they get this judgment. Yafeh dantuni, you, my deeds have judged me properly. That it's my deeds that judge me, not necessarily God judges me, but my own deeds are the ones that judge me. So you don't pick that up here. It's not so clear. Says it's not so clear who the them is in this case. But I'm thinking that it's possible it could be the heavenly court, or it could be my own deeds. My deeds judged me well. And so you know what? It's like the term for prayer is lehit palel. It's self-reflective. Palel is to judge. It's another verb meaning to judge something. So lehit palel, to pray, is to judge oneself. It's self-reflective. That's what I was thinking of when I saw this dantuni. You, plural, have judged me. That my deeds are what judges me. Okay, well that ends that piece, that whole thing about communal responsibility. And now we get this new section here. Amar Shmuel, Kol Yoshev B'Tanit Nikra Chotei. Okay, it's a pretty bold statement. Anybody who dwells in a fast or sits in observance of a fast is called a sinner. We thought that it was a good deed. So here we have to understand, what does it mean he's a sinner? Savar ki haitana detanya. So he followed Rabbi Elazar HaKapar, who was quoting Rabbi Yehuda Nasi. Oh, wait, they had a note here that Eliezer HaKapar Birabi, they understood it as that was his name. Birabi was the great, I think. That was his moniker, I thought it said here. No, HaKapar. Well, I don't know, okay. So, here it was, background, the great, Birabi. Appears after the name of a sage. This means that he was the son of a rabbi. Only if a rabbi is named, Rabbi Yossi Rabbi Yehuda means Rabbi Yossi, the son of Rabbi Yehuda. But here, it's simply an honorific. Okay. So it's not speaking in the name of Rabbi Yehuda Nasi. So Rabbi Elazar Kapar the Great says, what is the meaning when the verse states, with regard to a Nazirite, that he will atone for him for that he sinned by the soul, by the nefesh. So, but with what soul did the Nazirite sin? Rather, the Nazirite sinned by causing distress to himself when he abstained from wine. Because, right, that's one of the things that a Nazir does. A Nazir doesn't cut his hair, he doesn't drink wine, and he can't touch dead bodies, can't come near dead bodies. So, and you have then a case of a kal v'chomer, a minor to a major argument. If the Nazirite who just limited himself from drinking wine is called a sinner, well, oh my goodness, how much more so a person who doesn't eat anything in a fast should be considered a sinner. It's a little tough because if you look up the context of the verse here is he has to atone because he came into contact with the dead body inadvertently. And so therefore, since a Nazir isn't allowed to do that, he has to pay back, he has to atone for that wrong while he was in the state of Nazirut. But here they're understanding it, they're making a broader point. He doesn't drink wine, so how much the more so is a person who fasts for, not a communal fast, but takes a fast upon himself for whatever reason, is also a sinner. Shouldn't be doing that. Okay, wait a minute. We got another opinion. Rabbi Elazar Omer Nikra Kadosh. No. A person who is takes a fast upon himself is called sacred, holy, because in the same section about Nazirs, Kadosh Yehiyah, that he should gadel fera sa'arosho. He lets his hair grow wild and long, so that and he's considered sacred person.
So we were being sacred in the early months of the pandemic.
Right, I'm not cutting my hair because I want to be holy. And so in the case of, he only tzieratmo ela midvar echad. He only distressed himself in one area, in this case wine. He limited himself by not drinking wine. How much the more so if you don't eat at all? Oh my goodness, you're really a holy person. Now, I'm not sure how he translates it here as if Shmuel and Rabbi Elazar held both opinions. I read it this way: V'lishmuel ha'ikra kadosh. So Shmuel, you said he was a sinner. What do you do in the fact that talking about Nazir, they call him holy? So in that case, he says, Hahu agidul peraka'ai. When they call him holy, they're talking about the fact that he let his hair grow long. Well, the Rabbi Elazar, who told us that the Nazir is a sacred person, a holy person, what do you do when in that same passage he's referred to as a choteh, a sinner? And here it's that he made his soul impure, because remember he came. The reason why he had to atone was because he had come into contact with a dead body, which he's not allowed to do. So he impurified his soul, himself by coming into contact with a dead body, and that's what it. So when it calls him a sinner, it's only referring to that situation, and Shmuel's saying, well, they're only calling him holy because he allows his hair to grow wild, which is considered to be a holy act. The hair itself has an element of sanctity. But then we have a question on Rabbi Elazar. Umi amar Rabbi Elazar hachi. Did he really say that fasting is a virtuous act? Beha amar Rabbi Elazar. Didn't he say leolam yamod adam atzmo ki'ilu kadosh sharui betoch me'av? That a person should always consider that there's an element of sanctity within himself. They're literally within his bowels, but I think it's within himself is what they're saying, that within each person there's an element of holiness. So how could you say so that you're always sacred? So what is this about? How does fasting make you sacred? Although, or actually it's how can you consider yourself sacred if sacredness is inside the person by not eating and making yourself miserable, causing yourself to suffer? Doesn't that kind of counteract this natural holiness that we have within ourselves?
So I just noticed that Ezekiel put a question in the chat.
Oh, I'm sorry. Ezekiel, what do you, let me find where is it? What's the question, Ezekiel, since I Can't seem to find the.
Oh, he said, I have a problem with my microphone, but my
Oh.
question is, if today could be the world to come for the people from ancient time.
Oh, what did we?
I don't understand what does world to come mean, or what the rabbis meant with the
Oh,
world
okay.
to
Okay.
come.
So the world to come, what they mean is that there's this world, the material world that we live in, and there's a world that comes after this world, which is what's the word? It's pre-messianic. It's it's a world that's the spiritual world that comes after this one. So it doesn't mean the world to come is like 100 years from now. It means it's a completely different plane of existence. The world we live in is the material world, and that there is a holy spiritual world that's lying out there, and that will either will enter when we conclude our material life in this world, when we die, or at the end of time, after the Mashiach comes. And there's a lot of different versions of this, but one possibility, the Messiah comes, and there's a period of time after the Messiah comes where everything is good. And then we have the period of judgment, after the day of judgment, when God judges, when everybody comes back, physical resurrection. You have physical resurrection, the souls and the bodies come together, they're judged at this one period of time, and then the material world ends, and we have this spiritual existence. So it's either after we die and enter that world, or this world itself actually is going to end at some point. And just, it's the same idea as that the world began. There's the world starts with creation, then there's this middle period, and then there's end time, and there's what happens after the end. So that's what world to come means. It's not based on time, so that like after 100 years, you get another world. That is the world to come. Okay, so let's see where. Oh, so the verse here is, the sacred is in your midst, I will not come into the city. Now this statement indicates that it's prohibited to take a fast upon oneself. And the Gemara answers, as it often does, no, lo kasha. We got two situations here. One situation is where a person distresses himself, fasts, makes it, doesn't eat, so that's difficult, but it doesn't cause bodily harm. They're in good shape. And they're doing it for a spiritual purpose. The other one is where you overly burden your body, where you're not able to handle the distress, and you take the fast upon yourself, maybe for some kind of supercilious piety, and you actually hurt your body, you wound your body. And here we can see that in again, Jewish theology, rabbinic theology, we do not consider the body to be a bad thing. It's not a prison that our pure soul is stuck in, but it's actually a very good thing, and we have to treat it properly. And so fasting when we shouldn't, or when we don't need to, is not a good thing, because it can hurt the body. If it doesn't hurt you, then you can do it, and it can be a holy act. But for those who it's not good, maybe they're already don't have that much to eat, and they're not healthy, then it's not a good thing. Well, here's another opinion. Reish Lakish Amar Nikra Chasid. Person who fasts is called pious. Shne'emar Gomel Nafsho Ish Chased Ve'ocher She'ero. The verse from Proverbs is, the pious man does good. Gomel, Gomel is to like repay somebody or to pay somebody. But he has a different translation. Where was the wording here? He translated, let's see, language, Gomel. One who acts kindly. So you're kind to the soul. It's interesting, if you read the notes, there was clearly a difference between the Tosafot and Rashi on this whole notion of fasting. Tosafot were much less
one who acts.
supportive of it. They didn't think it was such a great idea. The pious man does good to his own soul, but he who troubles his own flesh is cruel. The verb gomel can mean weaning or abstaining from unnecessary pleasure. Accordingly, Reish Lakish derives from this verse that one who abstains from food is called pious because you're abstaining from unnecessary pleasure. Now, I don't understand similarly, it's not similarly, Rav Sheshet saying the exact opposite thing. The student of a Torah academy who sits in observance of a fast has let a dog eat his portion. Basically, you're an idiot. You've given up your food to a dog when you could have been eating the food. And he even says it weakens him and prevents him from studying. So it's not a good thing. So you have two different opinions here. Reish Lakish possibly saying that abstaining from pleasure is what you're doing. Rav Sheshet says you're weakening yourself. Bad idea. Continue on, Rabbi Yirmiyah Bar Abba said there's no complete stringent communal fast in Babylonia except for the 9th of Av alone. So he's adding in here completely stringent because it's otherwise what does it mean? There's no communal fast. That's hard to make sense of. So Steinsaltz edits in here completely stringent, meaning like there's no 24-hour fast except for the 9th of Av and of course Yom Kippur. But the text itself says there's just no, that's the only communal fast they engaged in. So I'm guessing that it's possible that among the Babylonians, they were really anti-fast. If you didn't, if there wasn't a really good reason for it to call for a communal fast. Everything else was treated as an individual fast, Steinsaltz says. Rabbi Yirmiyah Bar Abba Amar Reish Lakish Ein Talmid Chacham Rashai Leshev B'Ta'anit Mipnei Shemema'ed B'Melechet Shamayim. Here again, that idea, don't take a fast upon yourself. It's not a good idea because it reduces your strength from studying Torah. Torah is the highest level. So therefore, you don't want to fast. If it weakens you. Here we go again. Ochlim v'shotim mishechashecha. Now we're talking about fasting in these day-long fasts. You eat and drink from after dark. You can eat as much as you want, but you begin fasting once daybreak. And Rabbi Zera said that Rav Huna said, with regard to an individual who took a fast upon himself, even if he ate and drank the entire night, right? On the following day, you fast, and then you add the prayer, the tefillah for the ta'anit, the prayer for the ta'anit. Anenu v'anenu is what the prayer is called, because answer us, O God. Now then it says, if he completed his fast, then if he slept in the fast, eino midma'el shel ta'anit. So if you fast the whole day, and then you don't eat, at night, you fall asleep and you wake up the next morning, should you say the Anenu prayer again? And the answer is no, because this fasting seems to be a thing that you fix. You have to determine, you have to give your intention to fast. It's not something you just happen not to do. So the example here is, what does Rav Huna maintain in this regard? Does he hold that one does not fast for only a few hours? That is, what's the point here? Is it that you can't, because you didn't fast for the entire second day, you don't say the prayer? Or is it that you can hold a fast for a few hours? You can say, I'm going to fast, this morning till lunch. But if you do that, you don't pray the Anenu prayer. And the answer is, by Abai answers, Rav Huna holds that one can fast for hours. You can have a limited fast. You can declare for yourself a limited fast. And if you do that, you do pray. If you're during that fast period, you have prayer time, you do say the Anenu prayer, but it's different in this case above because he didn't take the fast upon himself. You have to basically declare that you're taking a fast. It's not something you just fall into. And so you have to declare it. And since the person who slept after fasting for the day and he slept, he didn't declare that he was going to fast on day number 2, and so you don't say the Anenu prayer. He just happened to not be eating. And then I love this last piece here. The Gemara relates Mar Ukva, who was the exilarch. He was the exilarch. He was the head of the community. But I love the fact that he's obviously a learned guy, but he doesn't know everything. So he happened to come to the city of Ginzek, which was a small town. And they, you know, when the rabbis would show up, these scholars would show up, the people would have questions for them. So they asked them 3 questions. Can one fast for hours or no? And he didn't have an answer. Do the clay jars belonging to Gentiles, which have been used for storing wine, are they permanently prohibited, or can you kosher them? Can you make them okay? He didn't have an answer for that one. And a third question: what garments did Moses serve all the days of the inauguration when he was acting as the priest and then inaugurating Aaron and his sons? And he didn't have an answer for that one either. So you see, it's okay not to know everything. But what do you do? Oh, well, he went to the study hall and he asked these questions. They said to him, okay, here's the answer. The halacha is one fast for hours, and he even prays the prayer, the Anenu prayer. And the halacha is that the jars belonging to Gentiles are permitted after they have not been used at all for 12 months. And the garments that Moses served in all 7 days of the inauguration, he did not serve in his own clothes, nor in the regular priestly clothes, but in a special chaluk lavan, a special white cloth. And then Rav Kahana added, it was a white cloak that doesn't have a hem. So we got the answers, but you go to the right people. Today we have Google, thank God, and we can get all the answers we need. But in those days,
I thought the timing was pretty good talking about clothes at an inauguration.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So so it was very fancy clothes, good clothes.
What
So
about the hem part? What's the significance of having a hem or not having a hem?
well, let's see. The answer that he gives is that Steinsaltz gives is the border at the hem, the border of a hem at the bottom of a garment. The white shirt that Moses wore during the 7 days didn't have that border. And Rashi explains that the shirt was made without a hem so that people didn't suspect Moses of illicitly removing money consecrated for the tabernacle
Oh,
in the fold
okay.
of his garment.
I think the hem sort of created some sort of a pocket. It's not like the hem we make now.
But it was interesting that elsewhere Rashi rejected that explanation, arguing that by the time the tabernacle was inaugurated, the money had already been spent. Okay, but we have different reasons for the hem. Oh, and Tosafot's explanation is it was a limited time garment. He only wore it that 1 week, so you wouldn't need a hem on it because you're not wearing it again. It's just needed to be covering him, I guess, a cloak to cover him. Okay. All right, very good. So yes, there was some good stuff, interesting stuff embedded in this text of rabbinic theology. So, all right. Hope to see people on Monday night for the class about, we're going to look at another Talmudic text, which again, I've been mentioning. People are familiar with it. It's the famous text of God after the rabbis say, we don't listen to heavenly voices. We make our own rules. God is very pleased, says, my children have defeated me. But we're going to look at the whole context of that story. And it seems that there's maybe a different meaning to the text. More self-reflective and self-critical. Okay, very good. So, and we'll keep going. I'll send the notes out for 12 this week.
Okay.
Hey, Rabbi?
Yeah.
You had said earlier you didn't know about like birth rates during coronavirus and stuff.
Yeah.
So I saw a thing not that long ago. Obviously, there was a lot of jokes, a lot and stuff about how everybody expected the birth rate to go up because we're all locked at home. We got nothing else to do, apparently. And it's actually gone. We're already in the middle of I don't know what they call it, baby bust or whatever. Young people aren't, because the economy, and it's all very, it's been a big economical issue. Nobody's having kids because nobody can afford, everybody thinks they can't afford it.
Right.
And then Corona has actually, everybody expected Corona to be sort of a correction, and it's made it worse. So at this point, I know we're only a year into it, but this past year has been very down,
Interesting.
more so than
yeah.
we already were.
So it's kind of intuitively people figure out when we're going through a difficult time, better not to have children. Now, of course, in our world, you can still have sexual relations and not give birth, but you just make sure you use birth control. But
Yeah.
Again, it's the same idea that if you're going through a hard time, no need to bring more mouths to feed. And it'll be interesting to see if, God willing, when we get done with this pandemic, hopefully soon, if there's a growth, people will say, okay, now it's time to have babies. We'll see.
It's hard to say because we were already in the middle of one, and people aren't. I think it's just a general hopefulness of the future. If people don't see a positive,
Yeah.
for people of my age that would be having kids and stuff, a lot of them they're not interested. There's already not, they don't see a good world to bring a kid in.
Oh, that's it. Yeah.
I know for other friends of mine, now that being more socially aware has been a thing, a lot of the people that I went to high school with, they had, for many of them, that if they did want kids, adoption and stuff like that was something that they wanted to do more.
Oh, that's
And I've
interesting.
come across more, now that we're more aware of our different social issues, there's already a lot of kids. There's already more kids than there are parents, unfortunately.
Yeah.
And I think that a lot of people of my generation have seen that as a challenge to rise to. So maybe we'll see more adoption rates go up.
Look,
More
that would be a
fostering
beautiful
rates go
thing.
up.
Beautiful thing if kids who have no parents or foster homes can be adopted and have given it safe homes. So we'll see if that holds out. All right, very good. Thanks for that
Here's a
information, and we'll
Here's a
see
fun
you.
trivia.
Yeah.
Can I give you a fun trivia for this Sunday morning while
Sure.
we leave? My brother said a fact that all of the people of this world would fit into the state of Texas if we put them in, just smushed them all in. And I was like, that cannot be true. I happened to look it up, and it is true. All of the people in the world, the state of Texas is so big that we could fit all into that, and then we would have the rest of the world with no people.
Wow. Okay.
That's hilarious.
Great.
I
It's
know.
fit. Okay.
Yeah.
Indeed.
Yeah, everyone's getting friendly.
All right. Thank you for
Have a
that
good-
trivia. Oh yeah, Judy. Okay. Take care, Judy. Bye.
Thank you.
Bye.
Have a good day.
Bye.